Hello everybody and welcome to the latest edition of the Royal Blue Podcast. My name is Joe Thomas, I am the Echo's Everton FC correspondent, and I'm joined here by a regular contributor, Gavin Buckland, Chris the Wolf of Old Hall Street Beesley, and Connor O'Neill. For those of you who are listening and not watching, because you can watch this now, we're in a cafe, and Chris has outdone all of us by wearing a black pinstripe suit to the podcast, while the rest of us are in chinos and shorts, and I'm in a brace with a broken ankle. So if you're listening to it and not watching, I'd certainly get over onto YouTube and take a look at what's going on here, because we really do make an odd bunch of commentators here and pundits in the middle of Liverpool city centre. Well, Everton don't do summer breaks. We know that. We've had plenty to talk about all summer already. Haven't had an off-season at all, but one thing that did happen last season is the players returned for their pre-season on Thursday morning. Gav, was a break from football, from on the pitch matters at least, long enough for you, or were you relieved to finally have the players pictured back at Finch Farm and going through all the midst of who could be injured and who could have a future at the club and whatnot?
I don't think it's ever long enough, is it really? I think we could all do it like 6 months off, really. But it's the off the field stuff, isn't it? I mean, years ago, I've done research. I mean, football closed down in June and the first couple of weeks in July. I mean, if you got the paper, there was absolutely nothing on football. It was all cricket and golf, but it's a 24/7 thing, and the way the club has been, and we don't need to go into that. It's you'd say back page, most days, hasn't it? Really, since the end of the season. And it keeps us busy, doesn't it? Keeps us talking. It gives us time to fill on podcasts. But yeah, you could do with the break. You become a little bit tired of it, don't you? Really, at the end of the day. But it's good to see the players back. And we said it's a good way of getting rid of last season's memories. It's like a fresh start, isn't it? Really. So yeah, good to see them back. And everybody's been on holiday by the looks of things. So yeah, it's give us something to look forward to for next season.
Absolutely. Fresh start, obviously. Sean Dyche taking us through his first pre-season as Everton manager. Chris, you've written a lot about this over, both when he signed as when he joined at Everton, and also, trying to fill some of the gaps this summer, although there haven't been that many gaps to fill for the reasons that we've already spoken about. I mean, what do you think Sean Dyche going to have in store for the players or something? I mean, I saw the interview with Dwight McNeil on the first day, and you could already see him wincing, I think, from the work that his legs is going to do. And I think I saw one of the pictures that the club photographer Tony McArdle took, and I think it was James Tarkowski and Dwight McNeil on the first day. They're just having whispers in the car park, and I thought, they're probably one of the few there that know what's coming for this the rest of the squad, and I'm sure they're taking great delight in telling everybody else about the horror stories of what's about to emerge.
Yeah, I mean, the first couple of days, as we know, in Finch Farm tend to be, as you've reported, Joe, those initial medical checks, stuff like that, going through the motions and the weights and all the measurements and stuff. But yeah, as we speak, Monday morning, the team are just flown out to their Alpine training camp, and of course we've got what we know about the infamous Gaffer's Day from his time at Burnley. Became a real fixture at the start of pre-season. Balls get left in the cupboard for the day, and it's all about that physical fitness. And I know we laugh about it, and that the players almost fearing it, looking at it in trepidation. But it's an important thing of the fitness that he requires from the team, and we'd like to see more of that next season. Having those levels that he requires. So yeah, we understand that it's a grueling day, but it's one I'm sure that the players will have mixed feelings about them. I mean, they will see that they'll hopefully the long-term benefits that come from like a day like that.
I think it's quite telling as well, because I mean, from what we know of Gaffer's Day, largely it's come from players who've been through it, and they typically speak positively about it. Obviously, because they might have gone through the difficulties in pre-season of having to go through those tests, but they've seen the end result after. They've seen the togetherness that it's helped to build and the strength that's helped. Obviously under Dyche, really, a Burnley side more often than not be competitive against a league in much bigger clubs, so they can kind of see the end product. So I think we'll all agree it's a good thing. Connor, when we had pre-season, when it came back on Thursday, one of the first people to arrive there, might be a little bit of a surprise to everyone, was Dele Alli. Good sign? Good statement of intent, you hope?
You'd like to hope so, wouldn't you? But I think there's still a long way to go before we can declare just Dele Alli coming back early, well, being one of the first to report back for pre-season as a real positive and a positive step in how and what happens next in his Everton career. I thought it was quite interesting that Mauricio Pochettino has obviously been appointed Chelsea manager, said over the weekend that he plans to speak to Dele and wants to find out what's gone on, because obviously under Pochettino with Tottenham, Dele Alli was a world beater and one of the best midfielders in world football. Since Pochettino's exit Spurs, his career's derailed, and he finds himself in the wilderness. I think the big thing for Dele Alli is clear. He needs to get fit. He needs to show signs of sharpness. But also, Everton need to make a decision as early as they possibly can on what to do, because obviously we all know that once he gets to 20 appearances, Everton have to give Tottenham £20 million. A club where money is tight, and we can all see that money is tight, and it needs to be invested wisely. 20 million to spend on a player who might not be of much use this season, if we're being brutally honest. If things don't work out for him, is a lot of money. So I think Everton need to really work out what they want to do with Dele Alli as early as possible. He obviously has travelled to Switzerland with the squad for pre-season. He should be using these next kind of 2 weeks as a way to get fit. But I think moving forward, they need to make an early call and decide what to do with him next, because as things stand, Everton do have a big decision to make in regards to Dele Alli. You would like to hope that he could force his way into Sean Dyche's thinking, but like I say, where money is tight, and unfortunately, sometimes business matters do rule football matters, and I think this is one of them occasions. But it was good to see him back, good to see him, eager to clearly make an impression. I know Sean Dyche spoke to him before the season finished that, he spoke to Dele briefly, and he kind of wanted to, restart his career and start again. So hopefully this is the restart that he needs. But yeah, I think the business side of the decision around Dele Alli needs to be made as early as possible, because we saw last season with Frank Lampard where he's kind of featured in pre-season and there's a lot of talk, and then he come off the bench against Chelsea and come off the bench against Aston Villa, and then the decision was made that he was going to leave. I think Everton need to get in a position where before they probably play Sporting Lisbon against Goodison before the season starts, where a decision's been made on Dele Alli whether he's going to be a key part of the squad this season, or whether he needs to look elsewhere. But no, it was good to see him back, and I think he spoke out there in terms of Gaffer's Day and togetherness. Sean Dyche is going to need a fit squad and a real togetherness, because a lack of transfer activity so far suggests that this is going to be a small group of players for Everton this season, and they're going to need to be together. They're going to need to be make a bit of a siege mentality, because there's not going to be an array of options by the looks of things, certainly at the start of the season. So yeah, Sean Dyche needs a fit and firing squad, and one that can hit the ground running, because Everton's first day fixtures are quite favourable. I think if we'd have all sat down and picked 8 fixtures, but they probably wouldn't be too far what we pick from. So it's a big start, because it doesn't look like it's going to be an array of options coming in.
No. Well, I think you make an interesting point. Obviously with Dele Alli, one thing that Sean Dyche can't do is he can't afford to have that experimentation period with him, because of the fees that start to come in, 10 million and 20 million pound, depending on how many appearances he's made. I think you make a good point there as well, with the idea back end of the summer last year. Obviously Dele Alli went to America, a difficult time in the games in America, but then he came back, went to Bloomfield Road. Me and you were there. Obviously, he scored twice at Blackpool, looked quite good. Frank Lampard spoke quite positively about him at the end of that game, and then obviously had a little bit of a role at the start of the season, and you got the impression that Lampard was maybe having a little look at seeing whether he could play a role. I mean, there was obviously at the time, first game of the season, Dominic Calvert-Lewin had just suffered that freak knee injury. Salman Rondon was suspended for following that horror tackle in the Brentford game at the back end of last season. It still scars my memory, the idea of him coming on with Everton trailing in a must-win game, 2-footing someone in the first 2 minutes and clapping their fans as he went off. And I mean, there was a school of thought that might have had him as starting as Everton's almost false 9 at the beginning of that season. In the end, it was Anthony Gordon that did that. But I think that you're right in the sense that I don't think Dyche will want to have any open-ended questions going into the start of the season. Whatever his plans are, he almost needs to have them in place before Sporting, or by Sporting at the least, rather than having any indecision, then dominating the first few weeks of the season. Because like we've discussed on here, all right, the fixtures start favourably for Everton. If they can get a good start, they can help build some momentum into a season that looks like it's going to be a difficult one, but with a good set of results, a few positive signings which may or may not come in, it wouldn't be difficult to start fostering a little bit of forward momentum going into the early stage of the season, which might push them over the edge in the latter parts of it. Obviously, we speak about Dele, we speak about fitness. One of the players who's will be massively looking upon over the summer is Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Worked really hard, Gav, over the summer. He's one of a few players like to Seamus Coleman, like to Nathan Patterson, who have been doing a lot of work in and around Finch Farm and elsewhere on their fitness in the close season to give them the best opportunity of having a season that isn't plagued by injury. And Everton have got a lot of players who've had seasons plagued by injuries. Dominic Calvert-Lewin went out to Munich specialist training clinic out there to work in the early parts of the close season. He's flown out with the squad today to the French-Swiss border. Good to see him mobile at least, and I think that's a positive sign as well, isn't it, Gav?
Well, yeah, we've seen all this before, haven't we, with Calvert-Lewin, though, isn't it? I mean, the acid test with Dominic is when he gets on the football pitch and has got to play football at professional level and, speed of the Premier League and so on and so forth. That's the test for me. So, I mean, it's good to see him back on training, but to me, it's good news in that he's training, to be fair. But it's when he gets back, Joe, isn't it? He gets back on the pitch and is playing in a full intensity Premier League match. That is the key for me. Is how does he react to that? And sadly, the one thing we've known over that, it's like 2 years now, isn't it? Calvert-Lewin's injury issues.
Played less than half the matches the past 2 seasons.
Yeah. Is that's the test, isn't it? And whether it's psychological as well going on. But it's good to see him back. Hopefully, what he's done in Germany, and something new. And I know Dicey said in the past about looking at his problems in a different way, and hopefully that will give him something a little bit different. But to me, I think it'd be great news for us if on the opening day of the season he's on the pitch. I think that's what I say, and then take it from there. That would be a good thing to say, because it removes a problem, doesn't it, straight away. And then you just got to hope and pray then that he can last the pace. It's going to be a dad as well, isn't he, Calvert-Lewin? Yeah. That brings pressures.
One of the few players with nice news, isn't it? I think over recent weeks. Obviously, James Tarkowski got married as well, didn't he?
Yeah.
Jordan Pickford's expecting his second child.
Yeah. So that brings his own pressures, doesn't it? Really. If he's on the pitch opening day, that'd be great against Fulham. Then just take it from there.
Chris, one of the things that I think that Everton certainly can't do this season, they have to learn from the lessons of the past, and the reality is that they need to prepare for a season and as though they almost expect Dominic Calvert-Lewin to be absent for a chunk of it. You can't have that naivety or ignorance to the issue anymore. Everton have had 2 lucky escapes, really, I think, from relegation. And when you look at the squad, obviously, Switzerland, you're going out to Switzerland later in this week. You'll be out there, and we'll probably speak to you whilst you're over there for the next pod back towards the end of the week. Everton have flown out there today. We've seen the squad. It's threadbare, isn't it? Let's be perfectly honest. We know the players that lost because of the end of their contracts, like Tom Davis, like Zvazmir Begovic, both players that Everton tried to sign on new deals, as with Isaac Price as well, youngster, and they turn it down. And then you also have the likes of Andros Townsend, Yerry Mina, Connor Cody at the end of their contracts. Everton have learned, or they should have learned over the past 2 years, that you need quality backups, you need depth, you need options, because you need to cater for the injuries, and almost expect for them to come. One of the things that we had a little look at the back end of last week was the minimum number of signings that we thought that Everton needed to make just to kind of have a competitive squad for this season. When we say competitive, I mean a side that should be able to avoid relegation, or at least have a fighting chance of that, and hopefully move further up the table depending on how things go. When you look at the squad at the minute, when you look at that list of players that's gone out there, when you add in the fact that, and we're in the process of finding out why, but like Holgate isn't in that squad, Mikolenko isn't in that squad either. Jean-Philippe Gbamin, probably less of a surprise. His agent's been very vocal about him not seeing a future for his player there. Even with Holgate, we know from the conversations that we've had in the footballing world that Everton are willing to listen to options for Mason Holgate this summer, though we're not sure if that's precisely the reason why he isn't on the flight. But just looking at that squad, and when you think of it, we're talking now on July 10th, first game of the season, August the 12th. That's 4 weeks. There's a lot of work to be done. Yeah. Where are you at the minute in your thought process on the strength of that squad? Are you worried? Are you nervous? Or you accept that this is just a natural part of the pre-season? There's always outgoings followed by incomes. We'll come on to more of the outgoings in a little bit, and the players that have left at the weekend and what that means. But are the alarm bells ringing for you just yet?
It is concerning, and it's just not a very enjoyable time for Evertonians and the rest of the footballing world.
When has it been an enjoyable time?
Yeah, it's not good times. But this time of the year, most football fans are looking forward to the new signings and new faces coming through the door, and it's almost like Everton are having to be reactive rather than proactive in the transfer window. They're seeing other teams being linked to players coming in, and Everton. Nobody's come through the door. Sean Dyche's been in the role now 5 months, yet to make a signing. And just that hope. I mean, the few names that have been linked, and then we're hearing just speculation at the moment, or not so far down the line with that one. And you talk about those players who've got moved out, Joe, and there are at least 5 bodies down. I mean, 6 if you include Townsend, but obviously he didn't play last season. He was injured for the whole piece, although he obviously came back, played for the under-21s. But at least 5 players who were in and around the first team last season have gone now and just not being replaced. And we're talking about something I keep banging the drum about, and I'll keep doing it. The worst equivalent points total in the club's entire history, and they're 5 players down from that squad that finished last season. So yeah, you could say, well, come the end of the window, the signings might be there. They ended up making 8 signings last summer, but a lot of those came towards the very end of the transfer window, and they weren't up and running by the time the season got underway, including obviously the all-important striker position. So yeah, it is concerning, especially in those key areas with creativity and goals, the areas that we know they needed the most. There hasn't been anyone in that respect, and Ellis Sims has gone out. So whatever you think about Ellis Sims, he's another striker, he's another player in that position, so they are looking very light.
That's it. You mentioned the 5 players. Obviously, that's before you include the likes of Ellis Sims, who's just departed. Obviously, something we'll come on to. And Isaac Price, who was on the cusp at various points of the senior team last year, might have had an opportunity to step up, might not have done this summer. So really, it is threadbare, even when you look back at that. I mean, obviously, we mentioned Sims there, Connor. We have had a little bit of transfer business over the last few days. Obviously, Ellis Sims has departed for Coventry. A deal that could be worth up to £8 million if everything's met. We've also seen the youngster Reece Samuel Smith as well move to Chelsea. A deal that could be worth up to around £4 million. They're interesting departures, really, I think, for a number of reasons. I don't think Ellis Sims' departure is any real surprise. I think it was clear that Frank Lampard didn't fancy Sims. I think that was obvious last season from the conversations that I was having in and around the club. And I think even when he was brought back from Sunderland over in January, I almost think that was a decision that was based around optics at the time. Everton were in a slump, bad run of results, struggling to find anyone in the transfer window. It didn't look good for them with the problems that they were having up front to have a young lad scoring as consistently as Sims was, at as high a level as he was. Obviously, a Sunderland side that at that point were in the top half of the Championship and looking towards the playoffs. So to bring him back was almost like a stopgap while they worked towards the signings. Everybody from Denise Barrett-Baxendale to Frank Lampard to Farhad Moshiri said we're coming, but obviously ultimately didn't come. So obviously he got that goal against Chelsea. Back end of the season, as Dominic Calvert-Lewin had further injury issues, it looked like Dyche didn't really trust Sims as his go-to man in a side that really didn't have many options going forward. Reece Samuel Smith, not someone that we've seen a lot of, but someone who's thought very, very highly of. Obviously joined the Everton Academy in the under-9s, got his twin brother there as well, represented England at all the youth levels going forward. Sad to see him go, but probably, like Sims, not someone that's going to have an impact on the first team next season, even though Everton are looking at left-backs. When you try and process those sales in your head at the minute, are you looking at that and you thinking, canny bit of business because any money coming in is useful for a side that doesn't have a big budget at the minute? Or are you looking at and you thinking, this is another example of perhaps the club having to sell its future in order to just try and have a chance of protecting its presence?
I think it's certainly the latter, isn't it? I think it goes hand in hand with, when you look at that squad list today that's come out for the I know there's obviously James Garner's missing and Jared Branthwaite's obviously missing, so he'll return. And there's obviously a few of the names we've mentioned who are missing, but I counted there was 14 senior, what you describe as senior first team players who were on the plane going to Switzerland right now. That's not many. When you think of, in an era where Premier League clubs can name 9 substitutes and make 5 substitutions, 14 senior players with maybe 3 or 4 to come back in is not enough. It's paper thin. And like Chris has already said, this is a squad that struggled massively last year. And having a full-time whistle blown against Bournemouth for Goodison Park on that Sunday afternoon in May to where we are now, the squad is significantly weaker. And I wrote, the other week in Royal Blue saying, the club can simply not afford another shambolic transfer window after January. But the signs so far are, it's going to be one of frustration and one that'll get fans nervous. And I think fans are already nervous. Certainly looking at that squad list today didn't fill me with much confidence moving into the start of the new season, which, like we've said, is only a few weeks away. Once you start playing friendlies, the time soon comes. And I think that squad list today, and the fact that 2 youngsters have been sold for what could be up to £12 million is proof that Everton had no option really but to cash in on them 2 lads, because if money is tight and funds are not, Sean Dyche alluded to himself, didn't have to both. He wasn't going to have a war chest like other managers have previously had. But I think funds, on the look of it, funds are tight, and Everton need to get every penny they can in now to protect their Premier League future, because this is the big thing, isn't it? I mean, Ellis Sims Ishii, Samuel Smith could become good players in years to come, but they're probably not going to have a massive impact on Everton next season. And right now, as things stand, Everton needs to do all they can to protect the Premier League status next season and get themselves in a position where, at the worst possible scenario, they finish 17th again, which people won't want to hear that, fans won't want to hear that, but that's what they need to do right now, because they can't afford to drop into the Championship. They can't afford to go into the second tier. We've spoke at length, why not? But for me, I think they were just two inevitable signs. I think if the fees had been offered, it's not surprising. I think with Sims as well, I always got the feeling that once Everton recalled him in January, but it become clear that he wasn't really in the thinking and going to be a first team option, that was probably the end of El Sims Everton, because I don't think as a young player he'd probably forgive Everton, because he was in such a rich vein of form at Sunderland. He was scoring goals. And it's interesting, well, I was talking to someone who quite a high profile figure at Sunderland the other week, and they were under the illusion that perhaps Ellis Sims was going to go back to Sunderland in January. They were under the impression that he was basically going in to start the window as cover, because Everton worked on bringing someone in, or at least one person in, possibly two, and then towards the end of the window he'd be allowed to go back to Sunderland on loan, because Everton have the players in who they want. Obviously that didn't transpire, but Sims didn't really get a look in, and I always felt like he was thrown into the real deep end, wasn't it? You think of the start he made Anfield, Old Trafford, they were games where Everton were on high to nothing essentially, and he was never really, I don't think, in the thinker. So £6 million to £8 million is probably a good deal into the last year of his contract as well. And Samuel Smith it's £2 million or £4 million that could be better saved. So I think it's disappointing, because I think it's never nice to see kids leave, especially when there's still questions over whether they can blossom into real talents. And I said this week on the pod, I would have liked Everton to put some kind of clause in a Coventry where they got first refusal to bring Sims back if that option ever arose. If he did go and get into a rich vein of form, become the next kind of much sought after Championship centre forward. But yeah, it's never nice. But when you look at that squad list, there's 14 senior players there, and kids are propping the rest of the places up. It's worrying, and because it's worrying is why you have to cash in and try and start getting players into the first team now.
It's part of the danger with Sims, though, isn't it? We saw this and it feels strange to speak of him in this light, but almost a problem with Salman Rondon. Obviously Everton managed to manufacture an agreement with him which saw him leave the club before January last season, and if we're honest, or if I'm honest, I thought that was a good bit of business clearing the decks for what was to come.
I wrote in print online that Everton made a great transfer decision, because it was clear that they were going to bring at least two forwards in January, and they were clearing the desk nice and early to get people in and get wages off the wage bill.
And when you look at how things transpired, as underwhelming as Rondon was, given the way that Dyche has set his teams up at Burnley in the past, and given the lack of options he had, may well have had a role to play in the final.
Well, he'd have probably blossomed a lot more than Sims and Warpay would have in that style of play, wouldn't he?
I think there was a sliding doors moment, was probably at Old Trafford. He had the start there, and obviously he'd scored the goal before the international break at Chelsea. Big moment for him. Obviously everybody absolutely delighted for him, and he'll always have that, and he'll always have the goodwill of Everton fans. But Everton at 0-0 at Old Trafford in that game, which was very much the game that started the slump under Dyche, that kind of led to thinking Everton might end up in trouble again. Obviously he dragged that chance wide at 0-0, and it was a good opportunity for someone who's made his name for being a clinical finisher from those type of opportunities, and that probably sealed the deal for him. Gav, when you look at those two sales, and then you look at what happened in January, obviously Anthony Gordon went for a deal with around £45 million. Nathan Broadhead, got into the million for him to Ipswich. Sebastian Quirk, Joe Anderson also left. You look at around, it's about, if all the clauses and everything's met, in the last 7 calendar months, Everton have brought probably around £60 million into the club through their academy. Now, when Kevin Farwell was appointed off the back of a strategic review, a much vaunted strategic review from the club back in February of last year, one of the things that he wanted to do, or was tasked with doing, was making the academy more efficient, both at getting players a pathway into the first team, and where that pathway perhaps wasn't open to them, perhaps they weren't deemed strong enough to make that transition and that step up, to start getting fees for them in a way that those across the park have managed to do. How many times have we bought the fees that Liverpool have managed to get for young players that have made very little senior impact? But it still doesn't really feel like a positive, this, does it?
You can't win, can you, really? And I get what supporters say, but on the one hand, supporters saying, we say, well, we should have a better academy, so players like Liverpool do and stuff like that. Though the progression at Liverpool is slightly enormously different to the one at Everton. And then when you do sell players to the academy, it says, we're selling away our future. Well, I mean, the one thing history shows you is we're not, because very few players who come through an academy at any club become established Premier League players. It's not just at Everton. So I don't get this. This is our future. We're selling like the family silver. That's not the case. History would tell us otherwise. And Sims is not really somebody I would say who was an academy player. Is he? He's somebody who's been through the academy system.
He come late as well.
He's 21. 21, 22.
Yeah.
And at that age, he's not going to develop any further. And that's just a good bit of business. And the other lad, Smith, is slightly different. He's at the sort of probably the start of the process, isn't he? But goes back to the Dele Alli thing. The one thing at the moment at the club is every decision is finance based, isn't it? We don't want to make a financial decision that's adverse to Everton. So therefore we'll sell. We want a positive benefit, don't we? That's one of the reasons why Smith's being sold. So I don't really get we're selling away our future, because history would tell us, as I say, would tell us otherwise. And as you say, I think you touched on it on Saturday, this is the type of business you should have been doing over the last 5 or 10 years. Players are just allowed to drift through the academy system, go on a free. When if you go back to my hackneyed old phrase, the best time to sell a player is 12 months before it's too late, is there's probably loads of players you've seen who've gone at Everton from the academy over the years on a free. At some point we could have got something for them, £500,000 here, £500,000 there, or whatever, and he'd just be like ends up like Matthew Pennington, who's still playing, was about 35 the academy, wasn't he, or something.
Don't speak ill of Pennington.
Yeah, I know, because I know there's correction. But that now I'm it's not the player though, it's the system, isn't it? And I think that thing you said there, didn't you, Joe? Efficient. About the academy being efficient, and I think that's the one thing I think that has been missing over the last 5 or 10 years for a number of reasons, possibly because they pride winning games rather than developing players. And I think the type of stuff we've seen in the last month and should do in the future is us making the most of academy players, as you say, who possibly won't make it into the first team, but sell them at the right time so the club benefits and they benefit. And I don't have a problem with it. To be honest with you, and if you can get 60 million, that's how much the club sees that 60 million. I think we know the answer to that. Certainly the Gordon money, but I've not got a problem with it really. To be
you
fair.
Make a good point. There's definitely a business merit in all of those. There's a business merit and a football merit in
Absolutely.
all of those decisions, isn't there? And I suppose the issue, again, like you rightly point out, is the system. It's not the fact that Everton have sold these players. It's at these points in their careers or been open to offers for them. It's the fact that the £60 million that's come in hasn't necessarily been £60 million that can go straight out on strengthening the first team squad. Yeah. That's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the players who are the 12 months at the end of the contract. That's it. It's like Warrington, isn't it? Lewis Warrington. I think and you're looking and thinking, Edwards says it was a really great prospect, but he's 20. I mean, Jared Brantwaite's been playing for England. He's only 4 months. He's 4 months older than Warrington, isn't he? He's been playing for England, and I think, like using Warrington as an example. Well, he's playing for Fleetwood. With all due respect, you expect somebody who can make it to the first team. I always think that if you're around England age groups, like Gordon played for England, didn't he? If you're in and around that at a young age, then you think they've got Premier League potential. But if you're playing, and history shows that with a lot of players we've seen, players who are playing League 1, League 2 football at 20, you're thinking, have they got a chance of making the first team? I'd say probably not. So therefore you should look to sell them. And that's the one thing we've not done. And I think, and there's a wider piece here, isn't it, really, around academy football, which is really a separate podcast, isn't it? Is why doesn't it work for anybody? I mean, Brentford don't have an academy team, do they?
No.
I think, and there's a wider piece on there. And if you're not going to develop players for the first team because they're not good enough, and that's most of them, let's face it, is sell them at the right time so you benefit. And I think we've not done the latter.
It's definitely fair to say that the system's changed quite considerably. It now favours the likes of the Behemoths, the likes of Man City and
Absolutely.
Chelsea, who can hoover up young talent at 14, 15, and no one, obviously he's saying a little bit older, but no one can really stop them. And gone are the days really where you have the likes of, say, Joe Hart, who came up at Shrewsbury Town, had a couple of seasons in the first team before progressing on to Manchester City, and people like that. Because it's not just affecting teams in the Premier League like Everton. It goes all the way down the pyramid, and has a massive distorting effect on the Football League in general.
Yeah, well, the classic example is played for mentioned already, Dele Alli. Was it
MK Dons.
Yeah, MK Dons, wasn't he? Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, City took, what was the fullback they took? Was it Lawrence, was it? They took off Everton's academy, wasn't it, a couple of years ago? And that's what they do. They don't develop players in-house, they just get the best players in other academies. And Everton are vulnerable because of the geography of the Northwest, aren't we? That's where we're vulnerable. And it's a wider piece on the academy system why it doesn't work. But again, that means, like, for me, I've not got a problem with sell players from it, really. And it benefits us at the moment, doesn't it?
We mentioned the academy, and obviously England's youth team had significant success on over the weekend, winning the European Under-21 Championships. Now Everton had two players, and they're not products of the academy. Obviously, James Garner, lad from Birkenhead, but he came through at Man United. Obviously Jared Branthwaite came through Carlisle, didn't he? He signed and pretty much went in and around the first team squad initially. But obviously one player that did come through the academy had a significant impact on the tournament, Chris, was Anthony Gordon. And named player of the tournament. Obviously, we know about his talent and his potential.
Yeah.
Can I just ask what your thoughts on Gordon and his success at that level are? I mean, obviously, really, it's something that Everton should take a degree of pride in, be able to produce a player that's gone on to shine at such a prestigious level. And I think, tweeted this over the weekend, I think the city of Liverpool can take a degree of pride, because you've got Curtis Jones and you've got Anthony Gordon. You've got a lad that's grown up in Toxteth, who's man of the match in the semi-final and the final. You've got a lad that's grown up in Kirkdale, who's a player of the tournament. That's fantastic. But I mean, from an Everton, obviously you're an Everton writer, but you're also an Everton fan. And obviously we know the circumstances in which Anthony Gordon left. And I do think that we largely have heard from one side of the story there. If we cast our minds back to January, obviously it was unpalatable the way in which Gordon left. We know he handed a transfer request. We know he didn't turn up for training. But also, I think if you properly look back to where we were around that stage, Everton was clearly a mess. And I think it'd be naive of us to think that, bearing in mind everything that we could see that showed that Everton was a mess, I'm sure it was behind the scenes when players were talking and things like that as well. But I mean, do you as an Everton, speaking as an Everton fan, do you take any pride in Anthony Gordon's success there, or are you more of the opinion that he left the club under the cloud? I don't want to think about that.
I don't think Evertonians taking much pride from Anthony Gordon getting played a tournament. I mean, we can talk about that tweet from the club where obviously Lee Carsley was mentioned, the manager, former Everton player, huge fan favourite, and obviously James Garner. And
that's it, just for people who haven't seen, Everton tweeted congratulations to their player, to obviously Branthwaite and Garner and Lee Carsley, ex-player, but omitted Anthony Gordon, a lad who'd come through their youth system and earned the club the best part of £45 million.
Yeah, I think in time these things can maybe change, and we saw obviously the way Rooney was in those initial years after his transfer from Everton, and then that obviously came full circle with him coming back, and even Ross Barkley wishing them well ahead of the final game of the season. He had quite acrimonious
and an X-rated reaction to when he stayed up.
But I think we've seen it's still very raw with Anthony Gordon. You mentioned the fact that him not turning up for training that last week, and obviously it goes two ways. So obviously the unsavoury scenes with the fans towards him as well. But there's been a very sort of cool reaction even from within the club itself. We mentioned that tweet. I think you even saw, Connor, when Newcastle were back at the club, certain club staff not exactly rushing to embrace Anthony in the tunnel area. I think that tells you all you need to know. If the club themselves are even like that, I can't expect those on the Gladys Street to be applauding Anthony Gordon's success. So that's the thing. He's always done very well at England at youth level, under 21 level, and there's something there as a player which has attracted Newcastle United to come in, and Chelsea were obviously interested in him as well, and Tottenham Hotspur. But there seems to be a discrepancy perhaps where Anthony Gordon is as a player in Anthony Gordon's head, even with the success in this tournament, and necessarily what he's actually produced in the Premier League on a regular basis. Did very well in a very struggling Everton team the season before last, sort of emerged. That was his breakthrough season, but I think he needs to do a lot more, sort of justify that price tag that Newcastle United have paid for him. I'd be more interested at this moment to see where the Anthony Gordon money is, to be honest. That's the big thing for me.
I've a good idea where it is.
Yeah,
I think it's probably about 2 miles down the road, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that money. I think their January business went into the club. They're not sitting on a transfer kitty of money that they didn't spend in January to spend in the summer. They just put it that way. It's interesting, obviously, what you say about Gordon there. I think there's a good player in there. I think he'll end up being a good signing for Newcastle. I think context is important, obviously, and you can look at this from some of the wider perspective of discussion we've had about the academy system anyway. One of the great shames of the struggles that Everton have had in the Premier League over the last few seasons is it's not been an environment that's been conducive to help and support young players burst onto the scene, really. Because over the last 2 years in particular, every single game, every single minute of every single game has been played under such immense pressure. You can't blood youngsters. You mentioned Lewis Warren, obviously he went to Fleetwood in League One last season. Lampard did keep him until the final day of the transfer window, thinking he might have a role to play, and then obviously got shot once he managed to get confirmation that Garner and Drissa Guy were coming in. Now, obviously say that about Anthony Gordon, I don't think anybody would dispute that it was good business for Everton at the time.
Okay.
Again, like you
absolutely.
referred to, Gav, I mean, obviously there is an element of selling your future there, but I think the amount of money that Everton got for him at the time, at the situation the club was in, that was a significant fee. He'll have to do a lot to justify that fee, even going forward, despite his success with England. Going to move on to another kind of younger player. Again, he's a player that's had success with what was the under-23s, but obviously came to Everton later, and that's João Virginia, Connor. Obviously, we heard over the weekend that he'd extended his contract at Everton. He's not someone that we've seen a lot of over the last few years. Been on loan at Sporting Lisbon, had a bit part role there, but did get senior experience in the Champions League, played for them at Ajax. Went on loan to Canberra in the Netherlands last season, had a reasonable start to the season, was their first choice goalkeeper for 17 games, got a few Eredivisie man of the matches and team of the week, things like that, but fell out of favour when there was a managerial change and he lost his place in the squad, and it was a squad that ultimately got relegated. We've spoken already here about more in the light of Dominic Calvert-Lewin, but what Dominic Calvert-Lewin should teach Everton is the fact that they can't get away with a lack of depth in important positions. Now, Everton have got one of the best keepers, arguably in the world in Jordan Pickford. He is one of the best keepers in the Premier League. I'm not saying he's the best, but he's certainly one of them. However talented João Virginia might be, there's clearly a significant drop-off between having the England number one and then João Virginia, 23 years old, fleeting experience at senior level, 3 appearances for Everton, and Andy Lonergan, who's also just signed a new contract, 39 years old, never actually made a competitive appearance for Everton. I was there in Sydney over in November when he came on against Western Sydney Wanderers for a moment. I think filled everybody around the club with a bit of joy because he's such a popular and valued character there, to at least see him get some minutes. When you look at that goalkeeping department now, Asmir Begovic was probably as good a number 2 goalkeepers Everton could hope to have, and he was an able deputy. We saw him keep a clean sheet in the first win of the season against West Ham. We saw him keep a clean sheet in the major, the really important win against Newcastle the season before. In between that, there was the drubbing at Arsenal, but it was very much after the Lord Mayor's party, having survived against Crystal Palace a couple of days earlier. When you're looking at that goalkeeping unit, as much as obviously we wish the best and hope the best and respect the talents of Virginia and respect the talents of Andy Lonergan, is that an area that is a problem for you going into this new season, Connor? Is that an area where you would think that Everton probably need to, even though they probably don't have very much money to spend, and even though there's a lot of other business that probably takes priority, how important do you think it is that they consider getting perhaps a more experienced deputy for Jordan Pickford, who could perhaps fill a role and maybe help continue Virginia's development and be another role model and inspiration for him there, perhaps for the longer term? Or do you think that is perhaps one of the areas, maybe like at right back, where obviously we know Bournemouth, Everton couldn't field the starting fullback, one of the most important games in the club's history, and they couldn't do that. But obviously James Garner did a good job there. He's impressed there for the England under-21s. He said he's happy to play there as a third choice for Patterson and Coleman. I can see a scenario where Everton no longer look at that and go, maybe we need to get a right back in to strengthen the squad as well. Or maybe we don't even need a full-back that can cover both options. We'll come on to Ashley Young later. Obviously, he could do that. And maybe focus their target specifically on a left-back to fill the squad. But with the goalkeeping unit, do you have any concerns with where that is right now? Do you think Sean Dyche should?
Yes, I do, because I think in losing Begovic, it's a massive blow. Probably one bigger blow than what people would think, because like you say there, he was such an able deputy and he's got Premier League experience, and he was clearly a likeable character around the club. But ultimately, Everton are going to have to gamble in certain areas of the pitch this summer. They've got no option because they don't have a war chest to go and fill every area of the pitch that they need filling. And I think maybe goalkeeper is one area that they might just gamble on. I think, unfortunately, we've got no option but to just go with Virginia as backup to Pickford, because ultimately funds are tight. There's areas of the pitch that desperately needs improving. I don't know how many times we've spoke about this over the last 2 years, but they've got to bring in at least a centre forward, if not 2 centre forwards. They can't go into the new season relying on Dominic Calvert-Lewin again, because that nearly had a disastrous effect last season. And if they do it again this season, there's an argument to make that they deserve everything that's going to come their way. Yeah. So that's 2 players. They need potentially Ash Young will come in so he could fill the left back void of cover for Mikalenko. They probably need maybe another midfielder, stroke winger, if Damari Gray is to leave. Obviously, he's been heavily linked with moves away. So I don't know whether Everton are now looking at this thinking we've got to gamble on certain areas of the pitch. And unfortunately, goalkeeping is going to be one department that we're going to gamble on and go with Virginia, because ultimately we need to spend the money elsewhere. I think there's an element of this though where the new contract is also to protect them, in the sense of maybe in a year's time they might get £2 million for Virginia to sell them, which again, going back to what Gav said earlier, it's £2 million more than we would have got 3 or 4 years ago, when he probably would have just got to the end of his contract and left, and we'd have got nothing in return for the investment put in. At least we would be recouping something back. And I think what we saying there about academy and transfers and stuff, I think there's an element here of Kevin Thelmo's almost the right football director at the wrong time, in the sense of, and I'm putting the heart at on here because I know there's a lot of people out there who have still got varied views on Kevin Thelwell and how good he is at his job and stuff like that. But I think Everton shows that he understands what is needed at the club. He's just not been in a position at first team level what other directors of football have. You certainly think of Steve Walsh, where they've had an open checkbook to go in and improve the squad. And I think if he'd been in that position, I don't think we'd have wasted anywhere near the millions that we have done, because although there's obviously blaring errors being made and struggles at first team level, I think some of the work he's done has been absolutely superb. And I think we certainly rectified the issue now of cashing on academy talent when you need to cash in and putting a club in a position where they can recoup money. I think you look at the Wolves deal that he negotiated, but I know Everton didn't end up taking the option to sign Conor Cody, but Everton had Conor Cody for 4.5 million. Leicester are paying up to 8.5 for him in the Championship. So again, there was he broke with a good deal there. So I think in terms of now with Virginia, the new contract is probably the double whammy of they maybe see him as an okay backup to Pickford if needed, and also the fact that given he got length time on his contract left, they will get something for him if they needed to. If they were to. I think the one who I think Everton supporters expected him to make a move was Tom Heaton, wasn't it? I think given his close relationship with Sean Dyche from the time at Burnley, and obviously the fact he was third choice at Man United, but he's obviously just extended his contract, and given now Dean Henderson's still coming back from injury and David De Gea's officially left United, he's the only senior goalkeeper there, so you suspect that's one avenue that's closed. But I just think Everton are in a position now where they've got to gamble on certain areas, the pitch, and goalkeeping is probably one of them. It's not great, because I don't think if Pickford was to get an injury before the start of the season or in the opening weeks of the season, I think we'd all be a little bit nervous about Virginia coming in. But I think, like I say, money's clearly tight. There's so many areas of the pitch that needs improving, and Everton have got to gamble, and maybe it's a gamble I think it's worth taking.
For all that we've said about Everton not being an environment that's been conducive to blooding youngsters, feels like Everton are going to go into this season with someone having an opportunity, or perhaps a higher level of responsibility on them than perhaps is right for this stage of their career. Which will be interesting, which will be interesting, I think, because I think there'll be a lot of them youngsters who are in and around the club who will basically be saying, I want to go out on loan and get first team experience. That's it. It's almost trying to work out where it's going to be. Is it going to be João Virginia get a bit of a chance? Is it going to be someone like Jared Branthwaite? Obviously, he's probably the closest to the genuine first team of those
He should
players.
Be starting, if you ask me.
Is it going to be Lewis Warrington? Could he be the guy that fills in for the fringe player role that Tom Davis had? Or is it going to be someone like Tom Cannon, who obviously Everton have shorn of strikers anyway, and he's shown that he can do it at Championship level. There's a lot of interest in Championship taking him back, but he's an option for Dyche. Hopefully he'll impress him over the summer. Kind of just want to just cover a little bit of the ground that we already have covered, and just ask you this, Gav, an interesting one. Obviously, we've spoken about the need to be sensible financially, the need to make the most of the opportunities that come their way for Everton. And you've also mentioned about obviously players entering last year their contract. Well, this player's not quite, because the club have an opportunity to extend it a further year in the summer. But one of the players that's attracted a fair bit of interest, and because of that option to extend could attract a fair bit of money, would be Damari Gray. Obviously, he's out there with Jamaica in the Gold Cup at the moment, just qualified for the semi-finals, so they're on Thursday, so he isn't going to be with Everton this week, certainly. Just putting this to you, if a club was to come in with an offer for Damari Gray right now, say 15 million pounds or so, would you look to cash in on that because of the wider strengthening that Everton could perhaps do with that money, and the fact that it could be a catalyst with some of the other fees that they've earned in the last few days to perhaps help Dyche fill in a few gaps anywhere? Obviously, Damari Gray wasn't a starter for Everton under Dyche, albeit he was very much on the cusp of the first team. Or would Damari Gray be the deal at the minute that you would urge Everton's caution on, because all of a sudden there's a real danger if you start almost allowing too many players to leave before replacements have come in? Would he be a risk too far in the same way that you could argue Gordon felt like it was back in January when no attackers did come in? Or would you say, just take the money?
It's like on a game show here now, isn't
it? I'd take the money. I mean, I've thought about the Damari Gray thing a bit. As you say, like close season gives you a little more headspace, but it's not what he's worth to another club, it's what he's worth to Everton is the point here, isn't it? And you touched on it there, Joe. It's like he was a fringe player last year. You would hope with new signings that actually on that basis he's going to be a fringe player this season. And he's got 1 year left on his contract. No, there's an option, but he's got 1 year, so he could conceivably go free if he chooses to next year. Yeah. So he's got 1 year left. History shows last season Dyche doesn't really fancy him because he doesn't work hard enough, and he actually is quite effective playing up front, but we hope that will be removed, that option. So he's going to be mostly, you would think, and it's probably a good sign if he's on the bench next season. It probably means we're doing quite well, doesn't it, really? So you're going to have a player on the bench for you next season. Well, now what would you pay for Everton for that? You'd probably pay 5 or 6 million quid. That's what it'd be worth to you, wouldn't you? Really? So not 50. I've heard some super fees. Nobody's going to pay 15 million on that basis, and I think anything above 6 or 7 million quid for Damari Gray, I'd take, because it's going to cost us more just to keep him on the bench for the season. So I think the fee I would accept for him will probably be a lot lower than what people are saying. Purely because what I don't want is miss an opportunity of selling him for 7 or 8 million quid this summer, then see him on the bench for all season, possibly the odd game here and there, and then go on a free at the end of the campaign. And I'd accept a fee a lot less than some of the numbers that are being quoted.
Even if Everton were to try and play the game of extending his contract by a year, but decided he was surplus to requirements next summer because he didn't have much of an impact this season, all that would do is drive the price down they could get for him as well, I suppose. Yeah. Whereas at the minute he's he had an all right season, showed moments of magic doing all right.
But his view could be he'd be entering his last big contract, wouldn't he? Yeah. It's better for me to see how many contract, because that gives me a better negotiating tool for wages when I finish at Everton. So I would be it'd be foolish for me personally, for him to extend by a year, because it removes some of his bargaining chips if he chose to move club bar with conceivably 2 years left. So I would accept a far lower fee than what people are quoting, purely because what we want to do is remove the risk of him being on the bench next season. Maybe could have got 7 or 8 million for him.
You would think if Everton could manufacture a scenario where, for instance, they ended up getting 10, 12 million, 15 million for Damari Gray, and managed to get someone like Arnaud Danjuma on an Avanti West Coast train last week with his agent on loan, in the same way that he almost did in January, you'd say that'd be pretty good business. And another player that's been linked to Everton, and Everton have been discussing him internally, is Ashley Young, is available on a free. Chris, if he was to come through the door, obviously just turned 38 years old, some fans would have reservations over him for that, but what would your thoughts be, Ashley Young at Everton?
We've been discussing this before we went on, and I think there seems to be a general consensus that in isolation Ashley Young is actually a potentially very canny piece of business, but I guess it's coming at this particular point where, as we say, Sean Dyche still hasn't made his first signing. The piece over the weekend about different Everton managers and their first signings and what that meant and all stuff like that. It's not a great look as your first signing of this is the way we go forward. But if you take it in isolation, it could actually be a very canny move in that he can play in more than one position or both flanks there. Although we've spoken about James Garner perhaps removing that right back need. But yeah, he certainly would have been one. Actually, not so young. He would be one of the oldest outfield players Everton have ever had. But he's kept himself fit. I believe he played over 30 games in all competitions for Villa last season. So, isn't that maybe he'd be a decent one for a 1 year deal? As we know, former teammate of Sean Dyche's as well, back at Watford 2 decades ago. A teenage Ashley Young was playing alongside Sean Dyche, centre-half, so he's a player the manager knows. So, yeah, I think we're sort of torn between, yes, in isolation, a potentially very good piece of business, but it just doesn't strike as a great look, and that first one through the door is a 38-year-old player. But, yeah, it's an intriguing one, isn't it?
It's all timing, isn't it? And Everton, we always say Everton are not very good at timing things, but I think if Everton would have sold Ellis Sims and took Victor Gorkes from Coventry in some swap deal or whatever, and then gone and got Ashley Young, the reaction would be a lot different to what it has been, because people would go, oh, well, I've moved that, experienced dad, probably fills the gap that Conor Cody's left of being that bit of dad of the group, moral pro, great attitudes, someone of the young players should look up to. I know you wrote, a piece in your own Sunday where, Steven Gerrard, obviously a bit of a nemesis for the Everton side of things, but spoke really glowingly about how he's, a really great professional, what he can bring, and I think people will look at it and think, oh, it's a good bit of business that, makes sense. It's the fact that the club have done very little so far, and everything's kind of being treated as speculation. There's no real names being floated about there, that everyone's just a little bit kind of looking at that going, oh, is this the best that we can really hope for this summer?
Yeah. I'm just going to jump in there. Obviously, Sean Dyche isn't an optics man, so I don't think he'll be too fussed. He'll do.
He won't care what anyone thinks, will he?
He won't care. But it's perhaps a pertinent point to finish on. Everything suggests so far that this is going to be Everton operating on a budget this season at best. It's clear from the lack of activity that's already taken place in terms of incoming and the sales that have left, that they're having to be shrewd in the market. They can't afford to be proactive. It really does, and I think a lot of fans have probably reached this conclusion through their own thoughts now, through obviously what we've been writing and saying and what other outlets have been doing, and from what people can genuinely see as what's going on in the club. If this really is a case now, just battening down the hatches and just having one season where you suck it up, just accept, it's about survival. That's it. Next summer, a whole fleet of players are out of contract. There's a real opportunity to kind of clear the decks then. Some of the more onerous contracts that are committed to, the likes of Gomez, Gabamin, Delhi, if they don't go this summer. And then again, the likes of Gray and Iwobi and a few others, there are options to kind of do things around. Obviously, they'd be on the cusp of moving to the new stadium, and they'd be in a far better position in terms of the profit and sustainability things for some of the years that drop off the accountancy years. It feels like, and also, we imagine it should be done this summer, but I imagine Everton will be in a different place in terms of investment and the board. If this is what it increasingly looks like to be, it's going to be a season where Everton just have to basically dig in, take it, accept it's going to be hard, accept that it's going to be. It might have to be James Garner, a promising centre midfielder playing at right back every now and then. It might be that João Virginia, who's only played 3 games, is your back up to the England number 1. It might be that a 38-year-old then comes in a free and it has to be cover for left back, right back, left midfield and right midfield and things like that.
He'd do a job, by the way.
And he would do a job. I think he'd be a good signing. I do. Certainly in Everton's circumstances. But ask all three of you this. If this is the case, and if this is what Everton fans have to be prepared for over the coming 12 months, do you think that is something that the club should be proactive in communicating to the fans? Do you think? I feel like throwing you the grenade every single time with this guy.
I know Chris got asked the guard question as well.
I'm going to start
yeah.
with Chris because he's the most formally dressed here. So I'm going to pick on him.
He does look like a hitman, by the way. We can see it. So be careful.
He's finishing down the pitch. So if that is what is going to be in store for Everton over the coming season, Chris, do you think the club should be proactive in communicating that? Do you think it would build a little bit of goodwill or a little bit of a bridge towards supporters so they just held their hands up and say, look, it's going to be difficult, we accept that, please just stick with us, brighter future lies on the horizon, we've just got to get through this next period?
It's a difficult one to say how they would actually communicate that obviously if you're in a position where you had lots of money, you wouldn't say, by the way, we've got 50 million to spend, by the way, we've got 80 million to spend or whatever. So it is difficult. I mean, there's ways they can do it more discreetly, subtly through ourselves, of course. But yeah, they need to know.
Which they haven't done so far.
But it's very concerning. I mean, the piece I did over the weekend, Royal Blue Column, it's at best sort of naive, at worst absolutely negligent to think that they can just sort of cut corners and do amend, and just because they've got a manager who has worked wonders on a shoestring budget in the past at Burnley, that's going to be enough. I mean, I was fortunate enough to be going around the old showroom at the Royal Liver Buildings last week, where Everton are taking prospective clients, the sort of people who would be... They're not calling it corporate hospitality at the new stadium. That's a big thing, and you read the piece, you can understand why. But for our intents and purposes, the corporate and hospitality at the new stadium, which is increasing from about 1,300 people at Goodison Park, so that's about 3% of the ground's capacity, to about 5,500 at the new stadium, so over 10% of the club's capacity. It's absolutely imperative that they are in the Premier League for this. When they make that move, whenever that may be, whether it's sometime in 24-25, or as I said, the music is pointing towards the start of 25-26 now, they've got to be in the Premier League to do that, and you're taking a big risk if you think we can just get by on the absolute bare minimum. We've had that for the last couple of seasons now, and just going in just thinking, we've got a canny manager now, we'll be all right with him. It's a very dangerous game, and if ever there was a time that Farhad Moshiri, if he's in any sort of position to do so, that self-proclaimed profligacy in the past, which he's admitted where they've not always spent large amounts of money wisely, if ever was a time to invest in the Everton squad, it would be now.
I think, though, what you say there, though, Joe, is right. I think they need to communicate in some way what the actual lay of the land is and how things look, because I think they need to create a siege mentality where it's us against the world. Goodison's a fortress. Everyone knows what to expect going into the start of the season, and it's just about battling, rolling the sleeves up, working hard, and getting over the line. And there's a bit of a rainbow here, and that is Bramley-Moore and going there. And Chris is right, they do need to be in the Premier League when they go there, because if they're not, you dread to think what position.
It becomes a financial white elephant, doesn't it?
A
millstone around
it's
their
not worth
necks.
thinking about them not being in the Premier League when they get there. No. But I think for this season, there does need to be a real kind of siege mentality.
When you say communicate, are they just telling fans something they already know? And already
be honest, be honest.
I think what probably be more. I mean, there is a degree to which you'd be telling fans what you'd be telling the fans what they think they already, and that's what we think we already know, because obviously we can see it. But I do think that, and we've covered this a lot in podcasts and in writings of the past 6 months, that a degree, bearing in mind the relationship between parts of the club and parts of the fan base, and the way that has deteriorated so dramatically over recent months. There is an argument to surely say that if this is the case, perhaps a degree of honesty or openness going into the season might help. It might help mobilise the troops a little bit more effectively if you say, look, we're in this battle, but we're telling you we're being honest. Join us in it, and we'll get through it together. Than it would be saying everything's all right. What you're talking about. Yeah. Oh, by the way, it's Ashley Young and Andy Lovelock starting on the first day of the season. Yeah. With all respect to them.
And Chris with his goal scorer record, he sounds as if he should be getting a game. I think the opportunity for that is when, not if, the MSP for the funding comes in. I think there's an opportunity then, like, to say,
That's a good point, of course.
you know, this money will not be available for transfers. This money will be, this money is going towards the stadium. I don't say like writing the press release for them, but give the message that at the moment, as you're aware, like all the club's funds are towards the new stadium, without necessarily saying, "Oh, that means we've got nothing on transfers." That is our focus of our financial. Our financial strategy at the moment is built around the stadium, without and just inferring, "Oh, that means, by the way, we've got no money for transfers," without saying, "Oh, by the way, we've got no money."
Do you just on that? Because obviously, the investment is still ongoing. Those talks, it hasn't been signed off yet, and there is an acceptance within the club and within MSP and those around them that this might be a deal that doesn't quite get. They're expected to get over the line this summer, but it might not. It might be an overhang into the season when it does do it. And obviously, I agree with what you're saying in the sense that that investment and the confirmation that provides an opportunity to have this conversation. If that investment was to be confirmed after the season started, do you think that would be too late?
Not necessarily so. I mean, I think, because as I say, I don't think it'd be telling people something they don't know, isn't it? I think everybody's aware by the players we've been linked with our transfer activity thus far that times are hard, and I think it might be something best said after the fact, as it were, really. But as you say, I mean, the timing of this such thing is a good timing for it. I just think that MSP thing is just tied into that. What would the club say? What would the statement be? Sorry, we've got no money for transfers.
I think the big worry though, isn't it, for fans, is this Kevin Falwell interview that is supposedly being done, which the fans forum said would be out by, I think it was at the end of June. Obviously that didn't happen. I think then they kind of backtracked a little bit on that and said, "Oh, that was just a rough figure of when it could come out." And
of course, one was also slated down for January. The club said as well. It didn't happen.
But now people are, their mind starts racing, doesn't it, when something doesn't appear and people expect it to appear, and people are saying, "Well, is it now worse than what when they spoke, or is it changed, or is it because there's no good news that it's not being put out?" And I think, if they just put that out and it might not be what the fans want to hear, but at least it's a bit of honesty and a bit of insight from someone high up.
I think my concern as well, just in terms of leaving it until after any deal sign up, the season's already started, is you almost. I certainly agree there's an argument to say that the club can't win whatever it says or whenever it says it. I have to be fair to him on that. There's also a danger if you do it after the season started, or maybe when the transfer window's ended, or investment is confirmed. Well, if Everton have had a good start to the season, and then you come out and say, "Look, I know we've had a good start to the season, but this is going to be tough." Then all of a sudden it halts some of the momentum and the positive momentum they might have built. Similarly, if they have a really bad start to the season, they come out and say, "Well, it's going to be tough." Then I think there'll be a degree of which you say, "Well, thanks for telling us now." I think
the message got to be delivered before the start of the season. Either way.
Can I just ask a question? Does any other Premier League club, as a matter of course, give their fans an update on their transfer activity?
Some have in the past, Aston Villa did. Paisley's done that interview where he explained why. And I think Brentford have done it in the past as well.
But it's an exception rather than the rule, isn't it?
Yeah. Dan Ashworth, I think, to last year, didn't he, where he said...
I mean, it is an exception rather than rule, but I also think that Everton, the circumstances in which Everton find themselves are also exceptional.
It's an opportunity for communication, isn't it, of a constructive side. So I sort of get that.
I think as well it's an opportunity to get on the front foot before a competitive ball's kicked, which is the big thing, because you want people walking in that opening day Goodison against Fulham, everyone's together, everyone united, everyone
there aren't many
on the team, and that's why I say create a siege mentality now.
For all the reasons that we've discussed, there aren't many avenues in which the club can get on the front foot and be proactive with at this present moment in time. Rebuilding or improving relationships with the fans is something that they certainly can be, and you think that might be something that's worth investing in now, at a time when obviously there perhaps people would be, there's a more conducive environment to have that conversation. Right, we've been gabbing on for ages now, so we're going to bring this to an end. Thanks to everybody for joining us. Thanks to everyone that's watching it. We're in a wonderful Lovelock's Cafe in the middle of Liverpool City Centre. And for those who've listened to us as well, we'll be back later on this week, probably in Thursday, when Chris will have swapped his pinstripe suit for his hiking boots, and will be live from his alpine retreat with the latest from what's going on with Sean Dyche and his merry men out there on the French-Swiss border. But we've been a Royal Blue podcast. Thanks ever so much for listeners. Thanks for following us. Thanks for reading our content. We really appreciate it. Keep smiling. Have a good week till we next speak to you.